Deep in the Sahyadri hills of Maharashtra, a rugged ridge of dense volcanic basalt cuts across the landscape. Right along this forbidding cliff face sit the 34 ancient Ellora caves. Cave 16, known as the Kailash Temple, utilizes a method distinct from almost any other structure of its era. Rather than assembling a building from the ground up, the engineers employed a massive top-down excavation, carving the entire complex downward from a single, solid rock face. The sheer scale of the removal often leaves observers searching for extraordinary explanations. Without a clear mechanical answer for how such a feat was managed, popular theories have turned toward extraterrestrial intervention or overnight magical creation. However, documented evidence gathered by the Archaeological Survey of India and UNESCO grounds this site in the tangible history of human labor. What we are looking at is the pinnacle of rock-cut architecture. Instead of stacking stone, the builders essentially sculpted a negative space, chipping away everything that was not the temple. To comprehend how a monument of this magnitude was actually realized, we must examine the specific geopolitical pressures of 8th century ancient India. In the mid-8th century, King Krishna I and the newly established Rashtrakuta dynasty needed to project total, undeniable dominance over the Deccan Plateau. Funding a project on this scale served as a calculated geopolitical statement. A temple that effectively consumed a mountain was designed to legitimize his rule and project an image of invincibility to rival kingdoms. Beyond politics, the king harbored a profound personal motivation. He intended to physically recreate Mount Kailash, the snow-covered Himalayan peak revered as the home of Lord Shiva. This practice is known as spatial theology. By carving a replica of Shiva's domain, the king was attempting to bring the sacred geography of the gods down into the mortal landscape of central India. The Kailash Temple was engineered for two distinct purposes. It was a supreme act of spiritual devotion that functioned as the ultimate piece of imperial propaganda. The architectural strategy is most visible in the main shikara, or tower. The vertical, tiered rock-cut geometry is deliberately carved to mimic the sharp, tapering silhouette of a mountain peak. Down at the base level, the engineers employed a massive optical illusion. A continuous row of life-sized elephant sculptures is carved directly into the bedrock, making it appear as though epic beasts are carrying the entire mountain. The exterior walls amplify this effect. Dense, intricate carvings depict deities and epic battles, mapping an entire mythological cosmos directly onto the raw cliff face. Hard historical evidence secures this as a human achievement. Copper plate inscriptions left by Krishna I's successors definitively credit him with the temple's patronage, anchoring the site's origin in historical fact. This timeline shows the reign of King Krishna I compared to the overall construction period. The scale of the work required a generational dedication that long outlasted the king himself. The true marvel of Kailasa is the product of specific historical forces, masterful ancient Indian engineering, sustained by unwavering, multi-generational imperial funding. King Krishna I's ambition successfully manifested a monument where political power perfectly intersected with spiritual devotion. Yet, while the historical record identifies who commissioned the temple, the physical reality of the site introduces a tension between the volume of material removed and the time allotted for its completion. This chart compares the estimated volume of solid basalt rock removed from the site, roughly 400,000 tons, against the maximum excavation rates possible with 8th century chisels and hammers. To complete this in less than 20 years, thousands of laborers would need to move over 60 tons of rock every single day. The physical logistics of hauling that much stone out of a deep pit using manual labor suggests a level of organization we are still working to reconstruct. Human construction relies on a simple, universal rule. Gravity dictates that we build from the ground up, adding material piece by piece. The Great Pyramids were assembled by stacking millions of heavy limestone blocks on a massive, wide base. The Taj Mahal achieved its symmetry by laying white marble course after course, rising steadily into the sky. The Roman Colosseum relied on layered concrete and stacked stone arches, rising out of deep, excavated foundations. This additive method comes with a built-in safety net. If a brick cracks or a stone fractures during construction, you discard it and replace it with a new one. The Kailasa temple completely discards this rule. It was never constructed. Looking at the site from above, you can see the architects started on the flat surface at the top of a cliff and dug their way downward, unearthing the building hiding inside the rock. Working top-down removes the safety net. A single swing of a heavy iron hammer at the wrong angle that cracks a primary stone pillar is permanent. There are no replacement blocks in solid mountain. To carve this out, an estimated 200,000 tons of solid basalt had to be physically broken apart and carried out of the site. Mastering this location required absolute precision. What we see today is exactly what was left behind. Before the first strike of a chisel, the entire complex had to be mapped out as a mathematical grid directly on the uneven surface of the mountain. Excavation began at the highest mathematical coordinate, the central spire, or shikara. These craftsmen were standing on the very roof they were carving, looking down at a solid rock face that would become a hall months later. They carved highly intricate, finalized deities into the upper exterior while suspended in midair, calculating proportions for columns that would support them below. The topmost decorative pinnacles were fully complete and polished, while the foundations remained buried beneath 30 meters of solid bedrock. Once the exterior trenches were deep enough, the excavation strategy shifted. The workers turned inward, tunneling horizontally to hollow out the temple's interior. They dug these cavernous galleries in near absolute darkness. Instead of bringing in columns, they had to precisely leave behind intact chunks of the mountain. They were fighting the invisible threat of gravity. Without modern instruments, the engineers had to calculate exactly how much ambient rock could be safely removed before the ceiling collapsed. Thousands of tons of downward force were suspended right above their heads. They designed these rock-cut pillars to intercept and safely disperse that localized stress. The stability of these interior spaces proves the workers were highly skilled structural engineers, navigating the mathematical risk of a fatal cave-in at every downward level. This engineering was executed using only iron chisels and hammers, pitting simple hand tools against volcanic basalt, one of the hardest rocks on Earth. To isolate an element as tall and thin as this freestanding pillar out of the mountain required a relentless, perfectly controlled impact. The removal of 200,000 tons of rock suggests a timeline spanning decades. This required the continuous transfer of mathematical grids and carving techniques from one generation of masters to the next. Progress was measured in millimeters. The slow, rhythmic striking of heavy iron chisels against jagged black basalt, generating endless dust and sharp stone chips. The achievement of Kailasa lies in this unbroken human discipline. The workforce maintained this singular vision, parting downward for generations without a single catastrophic structural error. After decades of carving downward, the workers finally reached the absolute bottom of the trench, hitting the designated temple floor. At this base level, they fashioned the remaining bedrock into a row of life-sized elephants wrapping around the bottom plinth. It creates a precise architectural illusion that captures the viewer's eye. From the courtyard, it appears as though these stone beasts are holding the entire weight of the mountain on their backs. Kailasa stands as the ultimate test of subtractive architecture, a mountain systematically chiseled away until only a masterpiece was left. But the architectural triumph of its creation is where the clear history ends and the anomalies begin. Step out of the daylight and into the heavy shadows of the interior doorways, and the narrative changes entirely. When massive, perfectly cut geometric shapes appear out of the fog, defying the natural landscape, the human mind struggles to process what it is seeing. This is the Kailasa Temple at Ellora. It sits at the bottom of a massive sheer pit, carved straight down into solid rock, revealing a sprawling, multi-story complex that feels entirely out of place. This scale and seemingly impossible location have made it a magnet for legends. Theories suggest extraterrestrial intervention, lost magical technologies, or divine beings building it overnight. These myths persist because we are accustomed to building things by stacking bricks or assembling steel. When confronted with a monolithic project of this magnitude, cut from a single piece of earth, our intuition fails us. Attributing Kailasa to magic or alien architects robs ancient humanity of one of its most significant physical and intellectual triumphs. To truly understand this site, modern historians and archaeologists have pushed past the supernatural rumors to examine the hard data left behind. The answers aren't hidden in the stars, they are recorded in the physical stone. Close scrutiny of the dense overlapping figures and intricate three-dimensional relief details reveals a level of craftsmanship that required a deeply skilled workforce. Following the cuts and chisel marks along the walls exposes an engineering reality that pushes the exact limits of the ancient world. At Kailasa, the boundary between fact and fiction is defined by what the ancient builders physically executed in the rock. Before a single chisel struck, this entire site was nothing more than raw, layered basalt, a solid and continuous volcanic mountain ridge. In the 8th century, King Krishna I of the Rashtrakuta dynasty looked at this solid rock and mandated an architectural vision of staggering ambition. We know this because builders left definitive archaeological proof, contradicting the myth of overnight divine construction. These detailed stone inscriptions serve as a hard historical record. They confirm human patronage, a highly organized labor force, and a timeline spanning multiple generations. Kailasa is a highly documented, state-sponsored decree. It required a vast economy and decades of sustained, unified effort to execute. The most difficult aspect of Kailasa to comprehend is that its construction was entirely subtractive. Not a single stone was brought in to build it. Rock was only taken away. This required a strict top-down carving logic, starting from the absolute peak of the mountain and working downward toward the floor. The ancient engineers had to perfectly visualize the final three-dimensional structure suspended inside the solid rock before making a single cut. The upper roof tiers, the intricate circular motifs, and the animal statues perched at the highest elevations represent the first cuts into the virgin bedrock. This created an environment with a zero margin for error. If a worker struck too hard or a fault line caused a support column to snap, there was no replacement stone to mortar into place. A single mistake could ruin the structural integrity of the entire temple complex. Yet they executed this method flawlessly on a massive vertical scale. This towering pillar and the guardian deity beside it remain seamlessly connected to the bedrock floor, cut from the exact same continuous massive stone. This mastery of spatial awareness and subtractive architecture represents a peak in human engineering, a three-dimensional monument carved with a spatial precision that is incredibly rare in the global history of architecture. Even with the dynasty identified and the top-down subtractive method understood, looking out over this sprawling courtyard presents genuine logistical puzzles that continue to baffle researchers. First, the acoustics and architectural harmony are incredibly precise. Coordinating thousands of workers to maintain perfect structural resonance across a single continuous piece of earth requires a system of communication and measurement we have yet to fully uncover. Second, there is the sheer math of the missing rock. This data visualization shows the volume of rock excavated from the site. Hundreds of thousands of tons of volcanic basalt were removed from this pit. Yet this massive amount of debris has completely vanished from the historical record, with no clear evidence of where it was moved or how it was disposed of. The lack of logistical evidence for this massive excavation forces us to accept that the boundaries of ancient human capability, organization, and sheer physical endurance are far wider than we currently understand. The questions that remain unanswered do not invite myths. They invite a deep respect for human devotion.